Welcome to the NCCAOM Ethics Review Workshop. I'm Robert Kienitz, and before we get started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background. In 1997, I was a member of the Arizona Society of Acupuncture, and I was invited to be on a four-person panel that wrote the Practice Act, that authored the Practice Act for the state of Arizona. And before we started actually sitting down and hashing out what we wanted our Practice Act to be, we did three things. The first thing we did was we got the Practice Acts and rules and regulations for every state that had a current acupuncture licensure. And we reviewed those very, very thoroughly. The second thing we did was we made an appointment with the Arizona State Attorney General's office, and we spoke with them at length about the kinds of things we wanted to institute, what we couldn't do, what we could do. At that time, there were almost 300 acupuncturists in Arizona, all practicing medicine without a license. So it was kind of an interesting time in the Wild West. And the third thing that we did was we contacted the state insurance commissioner and talked with them. We were trying to get insurance reciprocity, didn't get it through legislation, but we were able to learn some very interesting things from them. So we went ahead and, with all that information, we crafted our Practice Act and presented it to the legislation, who shredded it and turned it into something that looked wholly different than what we had presented them. But we did wind up with a Practice Act in Arizona about 2 years later, so that was a positive thing. So then I moved from Arizona sometime later to here. I moved here about 7 years ago and joined the North Carolina Association of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine. And the president at the time, John McGimsey, asked me if I'd be interested in helping host a 3-day workshop down on Carolina Beach, which was going to include various acupuncture seminars, some Qigong and Tai Chi, and he wanted to do a 4-hour NCCAOM ethics review. So once again, to kind of get my head wrapped around that, I interviewed the North Carolina State Attorney General's office and the North Carolina Insurance Commission. So we used all of that to kind of present and package this, and this is the fourth time that we've presented this seminar, and it works out pretty well. Now, if you've ever been to an ethics review seminar before, they can be pretty dry. So what I want to do, because we're going to be going through a lot of information, is I want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you have questions or comments that are relevant to what we're doing here, please speak up and ask, because we want this to be an exchange and a dialogue. What we're going to do is talk about some of the workshop objectives. We want to become reacquainted with the NCCAOM Code of Ethics and its recent revisions. We're going to review the commonalities of the Acupuncture Practice Acts throughout the United States, and we'll be doing that kind of on an ad hoc basis. You are going to be challenged to consider that what is allowed or implied under the state law may or may not fall within NCCAOM ethical guidelines. And you're also going to be asked to apply NCCAOM ethical guidelines to real-life practice challenges and help formulate best practice scenarios based on your understanding of those guidelines. NCCAOM certification indicates to employers, patients, and peers that one has met and maintains national standards for the safe and competent practice in their field of certification, as defined by the profession. The mission of the NCCAOM is to establish, assess, and promote recognized standards of competence and safety in acupuncture and oriental medicine for the protection and benefit of the public. So most of us go straight into private practice, typically working on our own, working by ourselves until we can, afford to have even a receptionist or something like that. So we're in this really cloistered and closed, singular environment, and practicing for years at a time like that, you kind of start to have different ways of thinking about things. You might tend to have rationalizations for doing things or prescribing things or developing protocols that really, maybe you're in kind of a gray area, or maybe you ought not to be doing it all, or maybe you should be doing them, but you don't really have any feedback on that. So one of the reasons that the NCCAOM likes us to come together every 4 years and have these discussions and dialogues is to have kind of a reality check. Oh, I didn't know that what I was doing in that contact with that patient was misleading or misguided, or no, it was perfectly appropriate. We just have to dialogue about these things and kind of give ourselves a reality check. So that's to me one of the main reasons. The average actionable complaints made to the NCCAOM, and this is by percent, over the 2-year period of 2006 to 2007, is we had misleading information was 7.5%, complaints about fitness to practice were 3.5%, conviction of a crime that compromised the ability to practice, 11.5%, negligence was 20.5%, outright fraud was 25%, boundary violations, 18.5%, and those, we'll talk more about boundary violations later, but that is boundary violations both physically and mentally, psychologically. And then cheating, actionable complaints were 13.5%. In the 2007-2008 time period, the disciplinary decisions made by the NCCAOM were 2 conditional recertifications. That is, the complainant was given the option to recertify after a period of time, 15 probations, that is that period of time, 2 letters of censure, which is essentially a letter to your state licensing board saying that you've erred, 4 voluntary surrenders of certificates, 3 cautionary letters, 17 certificates revoked. A revoked certificate and a surrender of certificate are the same thing. You never get it back. You'll never get an NCCAOM certificate back once it's revoked or voluntarily surrendered. 13 certificates suspended, 3 cases dismissed, and that was for a total of 59 cases during that calendar year. What we're here to talk about today are 3 different things. One of the things we're going to talk about are ethics, and then we'll be talking about the law. You, as NCCAOM diplomats, are nationally board certified in acupuncture. You're nationally board certified in Chinese herbology, or Asian bodywork, or in Oriental Medicine. Those are the only national board certifications there are in our profession in the United States. And anybody who is holding themselves out as in their advertising and saying that they're state licensed and nationally board certified, but they are not an NCCAOM diplomat, is giving false information. Because the only board certification we have in our profession is our diplomat status.